Hello and good evening. Thank you for coming. I'd like you to note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. Just a reminder, a member do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. Please note that to avoid the chat function on Microsoft Teams being used inappropriately, it has been disabled for the evening. May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in the Constitution. Thank you. And do we have any apologies?
We do. We have apologies from Stuart Monroe. Maria G will be arriving late, so she apologises for that. And we, in terms of those attending online, we have Rachel Burgess and Pauline Hellier-Simons.
Thank you. Moving on to the minutes. Have we an agreement on the minutes of the last meeting?
Excuse me, Ms. Mayor. Could I just propose an alteration on page 14, line 4? All development to date that's taken place under the core strategy altered by Gary. Actually, the word is authored. And I apologise for Democratic Services for not giving the. It is certainly true that all development to date has taken place under the core strategy authored by Gary Cowan.
Thank you. That's acceptable. Would we now like to vote on the minutes? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. I'm now going to ask, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I declare an interest as a Director of Loddon Homes and WBC Holdings Limited.
Councillor Jones.
I'd like to declare an interest as a Director of Loddon Homes and WBC Holdings.
And Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare an interest as a Director of Berrybrook Homes and WBC Holdings Limited.
And Councillor Hare.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare interest as Director of Optalis.
Thank you. As everybody's seen, I have had a few engagements this. I'm going to make a small announcement. I have been to a few functions since May and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, so thank you for this opportunity. But I would also like to thank all the many organisations and volunteers that work tirelessly for the benefit of the Wokingham residents. Also, I must just mention two events. One was the very colourful Pride event ending with a picnic and ice creams in Elmsfield. And on the following weekend, also in Elmsfield, I attended the extremely important picnic, welcome picnic, open to all newcomers to Wokingham, where there are many stalls giving out information. I'm also very pleased to announce the opening of the Carnival Hub on this coming Monday. This is happening at 1 o'clock, so hopefully I'll see everyone there for one very large photo shoot celebrating this achievement. Thank you. I have no public questions at the moment, so moving on to, are there any petitions? Okay, no petitions. We're now moving on to the presentation by the Chief Constable. Sorry, I'll put my glasses on. The Chief Constable, John Campbell and Matthew Barber, Police and Crime Commissioner. They're going to present virtually, and this will last about 20 minutes, and then there'll be questions put forward by the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'll go first, and I will endeavour to share my screen for members. Give me one moment. Are you able to see the presentation on the screen? Excellent. Thank you. Very briefly, Madam Mayor, just to begin by way of introduction, obviously many members will have had these presentations from the Chief Constable and myself before. I'll give a quick overview of some of the areas covered in my police and criminal justice plan and some of the work that's carried on by my office. The Chief will delve into some of the more operational detail and be able to take any issues of particular local operational interest, and then very happy for us both to take any questions. Obviously, my role is limited to that strategic oversight of the force rather than the day-to-day operational, but hopefully I'll touch on some of the areas which will be of interest to members as we go through the presentation. Just a quick recap of my police and criminal justice plan that I set out soon after taking office. 5 key areas. I won't go through this slide in detail. It's the same as you'll have had presented to you before. That remains the focus of the work that my office is doing in those areas that I'm holding the Chief Constable to account in delivering on behalf of the public of Thames Valley. Mention recruitment of police officers, clearly very topical and in people's minds. I'm sure the Chief will talk a little bit about this. As at the end of the financial year, to the end of May 2022, we had a net increase of 368 officers, which was from September 2019 when the National Uplift Programme began. That gave us a total headcount of 4,618 police officers. That's the highest number that Thames Valley has ever had, with a further 233 planned to be recruited over this financial year. As I've said before, I hope we can go further than that Home Office funded recruitment, and we're looking at future budgets to make sure that the growth in police officers can continue so that we at least keep pace with our growing population. By the end of this financial year, we will have not only more officers in absolute terms, but more officers per head of population as well. And we need to make sure that we keep pace with that inevitable growth. We're also looking to increase recruitment around PCSOs, special constables and other volunteers. PCSOs particularly, we've been under strength on, and that will no doubt be felt in some of your neighbourhood areas. We've seen in recent months many PCSOs joining the force as police constables, and that's great for them and it's very good for bolstering our police officer numbers, but obviously it simply means we have to backfill others to fill that gap. That recruitment is ongoing, but will inevitably take some time. Special constables, I think, are a really important part of the mix, not just because they give their time so willingly, but because of some of the skills that they can bring from their normal day jobs. At the moment, we've had a bit of a pause on special constable recruitment, partly because of the focus on regular constables and the need to get those volumes through training. But I'm hoping that we can seek to increase the recruitment of special constables. Ideally, we ought to have, to my mind, around 10% of our force replicated in special constables. So as we approach nearly 5,000 police officers in Thames Valley, ideally I'd like us to get to around 500 special constables. We're some way off doing that, but there are some financial bids going through for next year's budget looking at some of the supervision of special constables and some of the ways that we can attract and retain more specials and other volunteers. Moving on to Victims First. Many members will know that as PCC I have a statutory responsibility to provide services for victims of crime in Thames Valley, whether or not they've been reported to the police or not. The Victims First brand is sort of the overarching name for all of those operations, whether that be the front door service, which is provided by a team of my staff out of the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue HQ near Reading, just behind the IKEA at Calcott. whether it's that sort of first port of call or the more intensive services that I commission by specialist organisations who will provide support for victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and child victims of crime. We're currently going through a period of review of the Victims First Service to look at the model that we're using, particularly around consent from victims, to make sure that we are reaching out to as many people as possible who've been victims of crime. And also looking at the range of services that we offer. I think we need to do much more to support those who've been victims of acquisitive crime. So we're looking at some options around that. I'll shortly be publishing a summary of that review in the public domain. We haven't not publishing the whole thing because there is a certain amount of confidentiality around some of the commissioning partners that we have, but I want to make sure that we've got that information out there so that people can see how we're looking to review our services for the future. That brings me on to the Violence Reduction Unit. Some of this will again get covered by the Chief in the operational update, but this is a cross-agency project led by my office, staffed mainly by Thames Valley police officers, headed up by Director Superintendent Stan Gilmore. And there are a wide range of projects that are carried out under that Violence Reduction Unit header. We have significant funding from the Home Office, which has been welcomed, one of only a limited number of forces that have had that funding. We're now into what is probably the final 3 years of this. So a lot of the work now is looking at how we can make the work of the Violence Reduction Unit business as usual, not just for the police, but for partner organisations, including councils such as Wokingham, because this really is about a partnership. There are some operational responses that are effectively managed through the Violence Reduction Unit. We've seen hotspot policing, development of a new app for officers to use to target some of their patrols. But there is also a huge amount of intensive engagement and diversionary work we do. So all of that work with schools and particularly with young people to try and divert them away from violence is really important. And that's where we need to embed that with partners. Last 2 bullet points on there I think are important. The Thames Valley Together project is a really quite exciting data project which brings together data from local authorities, from the police, from health, and from other agencies. We all know that whenever there's a tragic incident and someone loses their lives, you'll read in the review that all of the agencies somewhere along the line had some contact with that person. What we're trying to do is bring that together up front so we can try and prevent some of those things from happening. There are clearly lots of issues that still remain to be resolved around the sharing of that data. But Thames Valley, I think, is leading the way nationally on how we are able to not just get the legal arrangements in place to share that data, but how we can actually visualise some of that and make sure that operationally that is available to practitioners both within and without the policing. Certainly a Thames Valley Together light version, which includes the headline police data, is already being used extensively by the force, and we're looking at how that can be integrated properly with local authorities. And I mentioned the serious violence duty there on this slide because under the new legislation, we all have a duty to prevent serious violence, whether that's in a local authority, in health and education. And really the Violence Reduction Unit is the way by which all statutory agencies can fulfil that serious violence duty by working together in partnership. Restart Thames Valley is, I think, a really important partnership to mention, to flag to members, because the work of youth offending teams is really critical, and how we can work with local authorities to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce reoffending. As with so much in life and those we deal with in the public sector, a vast amount of a resource is focused actually on a small number of people, and we know that a significant number of those who leave our prisons will reoffend. So I commissioned a review of all of those services that have contact with people from when they leave prison. So around 30 organisations have been involved in this process across Thames Valley, looking at the statutory agencies, the prisons probation service, through to the voluntary sector who will provide support. We've secured, I think, over £600,000 worth of funding from the Ministry of Justice for a year-long pilot, which is working with a cohort of 350 offenders coming from both Bullingdon and Bronzefield prisons, really working with them from around 6 months before they're released through to a year or so after their release, to try and make sure that all of the support that should be in place for them is actually helping them to stay out of prison rather than hindering their journey. An awful lot of that focus is actually on the 24 hours or so from when they leave prison. 33% of people leaving prison into Thames Valley are released on a Friday afternoon. That means that they have a really limited time to get in touch with housing, to sort out somewhere to live, to get in touch with their probation officer, to sort out the terms of their probation, to contact perhaps their drug worker, to make sure that they are in touch with all those statutory agencies on a Friday afternoon when frankly all they want to do is get out of prison because they've finally been released. So there's a huge amount that we can do as all those agencies to streamline some of those processes. And we're asking all partner organisations to sign up to the Concord Act committing to those arrangements. And we've already had conversations with local authorities through the community safety partnerships around the details of what that can look like for each area. CCTV partnership, this is an area I've mentioned with your leader in discussions when I met with him just a couple of weeks ago. We're recognising the very difficult circumstances, the inconsistencies of CCTV provision across Thames Valley. That is different for just about every local authority area. The arrangements that are in place, the split of funding between police and local authorities, who owns the kit, who manages the people, and it really is very, very varied and having very different types of technology in place. I've committed additional funding both for this current year and also looking to include funding for future years, recognising that the police need to step up into this space. Whilst we welcome the commitment of local authority partners to supporting CCTV, ultimately we need to recognise it is the police that are the agency that benefit the most from CCTV, and so it's right that the police contribute the lion's share of funding. The intention is to move to a system where, with willing partners, Thames Valley Police would own, maintain and operate CCTV equipment with a partnership arrangement in place for local authorities to have some oversight of those arrangements, the placement of cameras, etc., still making a financial contribution, but without having the same level of liability. We're working initially in Oxfordshire. The reason for that is the councils there are already looking to come together to join their 5 separate systems into one single control room. So we're at that stage where there's already 5 willing partners. Hopefully we can come to an arrangement where we get everybody to buy into one system, where Thames Valley Police would manage that as I've set out. If that works in Oxfordshire, that will, I hope, provide a template where we come out to local authorities across the whole of Thames Valley, trying to get everybody to buy into one system. The benefits of that are increased resilience and lower individual costs for local authorities, because we'll be able to monitor at a greater scale. We'll have much more resilient equipment, and we'll be able to plan for the future. Ultimately, I would love us, for example, to be able to get technology that will link in with the existing systems that the police have for sharing digital evidence. Therefore, officers can call up CCTV imagery from anywhere in the Thames Valley without having to physically go to that control room and obtain that data. That would be hugely beneficial from a policing perspective and investigations. It would make the whole of the CCTV network much more effective in protecting the public, as well as hopefully managing costs. This is an area that I've discussed at the Police and Crime Panel, and certainly had unanimous support there from every local authority representative. It will take us some years, I think, frankly, to get to a Thames Valley-wide network, but I want to flag it with members about the work that's going to start in Oxfordshire, because as soon as we can roll it out, I'm really keen that we do. The next area is around the Community Safety Fund and obviously the Community Safety Partnerships. This was really just a reminder of the new funding arrangements that I put in place last year. Over the 3 years, Woking Borough will receive over £380,000. I've looked at the formula of how this funding was allocated. It was based on a very outdated allocation formula, which frankly existed in broadly similar form since before the creation of the Police and Crime Commissioner, from when funding came from the Police Authority and direct funding from the Ministry of Local Government. So this is the new formula looks like. It sees Woking increasing funding year on year up to 2024-25, at which point I expect it will stabilise. The funding is given for 3 years to allow that that planning ahead by local authorities, and for spend to be profiled differently over those 3 years. And I've committed again to a future 3-year deal. So we'll review the calculation within that formula in the final year. So we'll be able to issue hopefully another 3 years settlement. Of course, that goes, it's not just the money, but that goes hand in hand with the very close work between my office and your community safety partnership, making sure that we are working closely on individual projects, securing funding from the Home Office where that's possible. And we've been really successful in recent years on securing particularly Safer Streets funding for various local authorities across Thames Valley. And we're currently in the process of recruiting a new analyst who will be made available to provide some support to community safety partnerships, meaning local authorities don't have to fund that work themselves. A few other key highlights I just wanted to mention. I'm very happy to go into any more of this in detail when we get to the questions, but I'm conscious of the time and your busy agenda. So 4 particular issues that are coming up at the moment. We had a road safety summit early in May. That clashed a little bit with the local elections. We're having another iteration of that in November, so invitations will be coming out to Woking members and officers in due course. That's really looking collectively at local government as highways authorities, the police, and other user groups, if you like, the cycling groups, motorist groups, motorcycle groups, horse riders. Everybody has an interest in road safety, and looking, yes, at police enforcement and what can be done, but also more widely at can we target Vision Zero across the Thames Valley? What does that look like? What policy areas can we agree on collectively across all of those areas? Clearly not to bind highways authorities, but to look collectively at where we can get some easy wins and to address issues of road safety across the piece, because some of those issues around speeding, around driving standards, around road layouts and enforcement are really important that we get those right everywhere. We see the loss of life on our roads remains significant. We've seen reductions in recent years, but they have generally plateaued as they have across the country. And if we saw the loss of life in any other area of public life that we see on our roads, I think it would be considered to be unacceptable. So I think it's quite right that we seek to tackle that where possible. Safety of women and girls strategy. So the Force have already published a violence against women and girls strategy, which looks at the operational work that Thames Valley Police are doing. I've done some separate work from that, which will be published shortly. It's just in review at the moment, which looks at how my office works more broadly, encompassing some of the operational work at Thames Valley Police, but also that broader work with partners, in looking at things like how we can improve CCTV coverage in our towns and cities to make sure that we create that safe environment for women and girls, and working closely with partners. Fire and rescue governance is very topical at the moment. You'll no doubt be aware of the white paper that has been published by the government on fire governance. A whole range of issues around fire and rescue authorities, or fire rescue services rather, that are being considered, but governance is a really important part, which suggests the removal of fire and rescue authorities, in your case obviously the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Authority, to be replaced with either a directly elected mayor of a combined authority, an individual council lead, or a police and crime commissioner. In the case of Berkshire and Buckinghamshire, if those 3 options are set out as carried through, as set out in the white paper, that really only leaves one option in the Thames Valley, and that is the police and crime commissioner. So it looks that the government are set to transfer responsibility of fire and rescue to me.
Excuse me. I have a councillor Jorgensen wishing to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know whether it's appropriate, but I thought in order for the Chief Constable to have a chance to actually say something as well, I wonder if I could propose that under Rule 4.2.12N, we extend the time of this item in line with 4.2.2.1.
And how long would you like that for?
I would suggest another 10 minutes would probably be sensible.
Can we take this to a vote, please? Anybody would like to extend it by an extra 10 minutes? 4, carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I will also take the hint and and try and draw my remarks to a close reasonably soon. So I've mentioned fire and rescue governance, improving public confidence. I won't dwell on hugely at this stage. It is clearly very important. One of the main areas where I think we need to focus on is improving the 101 system, where we had seen really poor performance in recent years, which had improved, but has begun to deteriorate again. And it's an issue that I'm having many discussions with the Chief Constable about how we make sure that we can attract and retain the staff that we need in order to manage that service, but look more widely at some of the system issues that are in place to make sure that we can improve that particular area. I think this is one of my final slides, you'll be pleased to know, just to mention the community fund. This is funding which is taken from the sale of stolen goods which can't be returned to their rightful owners, and very much what I would regard as a Robin Hood fund in many ways. We have 2 public bidding rounds a year that we've moved to, so there's a more regular pattern of funding for organisations who want to bid into this. The next one will be coming up in September, where projects that support those broad areas within my police and criminal justice plan, they can put bids to us. They're normally in the region of between £1,000 and £5,000 individually. Those applications are considered by my office and agreed between myself and the Chief Constable for funding. We are always hugely oversubscribed, but it is a really good opportunity to support some smaller projects that can really improve community safety. We're using the same fund, but additional cash to support the Lowland Search and Rescue dogs within Thames Valley and Neighbourhood Watch. So they're now getting, rather than having to bid each year, they're now getting a regular source of funding from this fund. So it's not a cost to the taxpayer, but those are both really important organisations which do a huge amount of good within our community, and I'm really pleased to be able to support them. I know in the case of Berkshire Search and Rescue that there have been discussions with Woking Borough Council in the past around helping them find a new location, which they are desperately looking for, and I hope the members will continue to assist in that work, because they do some fantastic work within the community, which often goes unseen, but is very worthy. And I think you'll be pleased to know that that is my final slide. So I will stop sharing the screen at that point and hand over to the Chief Constable. I'm very happy to take any questions towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. John Campbell here. Thank you very much for the invite, as always. My screen is going to be shared shortly. There we go. And very pleased to welcome your local police commander, Superintendent Helen Kenny. I'll just touch on a couple of the points, given the times that we're on, and then hand over to Helen. Thanks, Shyam. Next slide. We talked a little bit about the profile of Thames Valley Police, and Matthew's talked about the welcome increase in police officers. One thing to note about that, there is a little bit of a delay in terms of their recruitment and then deployment, just because that's the nature of the training programme, but we're already seeing those officers coming through. And in the first year, the vast majority of those initial 180 or so officers were spread across the local policing areas, across the force area, to support response teams primarily. I would point out that wonderful blend that we have of police officers and police staff in Thames Valley Police. So around about 7,500 staff. Police staff play an important part. They're not warranted officers, but they are involved in call handling. They're involved in crime scene investigation and all the infrastructure that supports a large organisation that we are. And also a welcome and very healthy cadre of volunteers, members of the public who want to come and help policing at no cost to us, and with their best wishes and endeavours, free from their work, and also cadets and mini police, which not only are a good way of spreading the role and the understanding of the police, but also acts as a welcome recruitment line for people wanting to join. Thanks, Shyam. We are in a recruitment programme, and the welcome benefit of in excess of 600 officers is a 3-year programme. I am pleased to say that we have been able to use that as a wonderful catalyst to increase our recruitment of Black, Asian, minority ethnic officers in particular, and also female officers. So you'll see from that slide that 43% almost of our most recent police officer joiners have been female members of the public. And also we have seen around about 14% of our applicants or student officers are from a Black and Asian minority background, which is a wonderful increase. Now, we need to do far more in there in order to build up and catch up with, if you like, the proportion of the population, but a welcome increase. And I guess at a time when it won't be lost on any of you that some of the national stories about policing have been around, you know, race and sexism within the service. I think that kind of recruitment profile is very encouraging and paints a slightly different picture of people's perception of policing locally, which we welcome. So still more to do in those areas, and I'll come back to some of those issues later. Thanks, Sham. A bit about our work in numbers. This is obviously the year end, and it was a COVID year. Kind of difficult to remember sometimes, isn't it? That in actual fact, some of the regulations and restrictions were still in place last year. So the numbers actually in terms of calls are generally lower than we would normally expect, but that's about, as you can see, 330,909 calls, 500,101 calls. I would draw your eye, if I could, just to the people in mental health crisis taken to the place of safety. So that's 1,500 people that we have used our powers on that in effect were a threat to themselves or to others in the community, and we have used them and worked with our health colleagues. That doesn't really paint the picture of the amount of calls that we get where mental health is an issue for those people that we're dealing with, and I think that's a significant workload, generally for health as well, but also for policing also. You'll see the amount of missing people that we're engaged with. A lot of those people are young persons, often in care, both in local authority care and also private care homes as well. And obviously every time that a child or young person is at large without, if you like, guardianship or parental control, we know they represent a risk to themselves. So we treat those very seriously. And you get a sense of the numbers of people that we stop and search across the force area. That's monitored very closely by a community IAG, independent advisory group, that's made up of members of the public that are able to assess and randomly view any of our stop and search body worn video in order to hold us to account. And I'm encouraged by their responses that generally say we do it well. I'll come back to that in due course. Thanks, Sham. A pen picture from last year moving into this year. So a welcome reduction in burglary. We'll hear a bit more about that and the figures locally from Helen. A welcome reduction in knife crime, albeit that we still have, of our 24 homicides in the force area, 10 of those were knife enabled. So still a concern for us collectively. Personal robbery, again, you'll see welcome reductions. Serious violence. Now, we are at the moment we're about third nationally for our violence rates, which is pretty encouraging. Every one of those is a crime that we would not wish for, but in terms of comparing ourselves nationally, the communities of the Thames Valley are safer than most, certainly. You'll see a little bit around disruptions of county drug lines and OCGs, organised crime groups. So some of those are significant disruptions, and some of those where court is an outcome and sentences, and some of those are tactics that we use to make sure we are disrupting their ability to commit crime and profit from their criminality. And what I'm pleased to say is that we have seen a significant increase in formal actionable detections over recent years. That's justice for victims, and you'll see some figures there from last year compared to where we were a few years ago. I'm pleased to say at the moment we're also showing on top of that increase another 11% increase. It's never enough for me. I push the force hard because every crime impacts upon people's well-being and welfare, but we are making progress in that area. Thanks, Sham. I will focus a little bit on violence against women and girls, and there are some questions in the questions, so I might cover off some of this in terms of the questions that have been posed. So we have always treated the crimes that form constituent parts of a strategy for crimes against women and girls in particular as priorities in the force. That's rape, sexual assault, stalking and harassment. We have coalesced that now, form part of a strategy. There's a number of strands of that, 3 in effect. You've got the enforcement activity that we are obviously take a primacy role in, and that's around domestic abuse, where the vast majority, 90% of victims are women and the perpetrators are men. We then have rape and sexual assault, again, predominantly female victims, and then also things like stalking, harassment, and also precursor crimes. So where we have evidence of, if you like, sexual touching, unwanted harassment or exposure offences, that is now monitored and has been sometimes very closely coordinated by a detective superintendent and a team of officers driving the performance at the centre of the force. So that's the enforcement, and we have seen increases. So this year, pleased to see a 30% increase in domestic abuse outcomes. And at the moment, a 57% increase in sexual assaults. And that sexual assault crimes and rape investigations are quite complex for a whole host of reasons. We work hard to make sure we maintain the confidence of victims within the criminal justice system, because you'll be aware there are some backlogs, and that can be a challenge for us in terms of victim confidence to pursue what is already sometimes a challenging process for them. And we've also seen a 33% increase in stalking and harassment outcomes as well. So again, still plenty to do in this area, but welcome increases. We have now a Royal Crime Task Force in place. That's a team of officers. We're still building that throughout the year under an inspector with 2 sergeants and 18 officers across the north and the south of the force. They're there to supplement your neighbourhood teams who are dealing in rural communities, and have had some significant successes already, recovering a significant amount of plant that had been stolen and other offences that particularly affect isolated rural communities as well. And certainly from the feedback I'm getting, and if any councillors have had any engagement, pleased to hear good, bad and indifferent from yourselves, but the feedback I get is very positive. And likewise on the drugs task force, there's a number of ways you can actually disrupt organised crime groups, and we use all different tactics. One is the longer term investigations that will be familiar in terms of surveillance and covert tactics, and we take out a certain level of drug dealer. And then we have the approach that the drug task force lead on, which is basically creating a very hostile environment for drug dealers using a variety of covert tactics. And again, we've seen a number of disruptions, and I touched on those at the start of the year. The one thing that I'm pressing upon my local police commanders is the importance of tackling some of that more obvious drug dealing in our communities. And I think we need to get better at that feedback loop into when people report to us some open air or public drug dealing and what we're doing about it. Sometimes we are doing covert work that isn't obvious to share, but I think we can get better in sharing what we're doing with communities, because in the absence of that, you'll be forgiven for thinking that it's not a priority, when in actual fact it is very much a priority for us. But the feedback loop is important. Thank you, Shan. Okay, I'll hand over to Helen for some local information.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me along. So here we've got on this slide just a few key headlines of some of our local crime trends just for the Wokingham area. So these show comparisons in our 2021 to 22 figures. So as you can see there, we've got reductions around personal robbery, shoplift drug offences and residential burglary. As you'll note, one of the most significant reductions we've got is burglary dwelling, which is burglary of residential properties. This reduction of 40% is based on a 5-year average rather than compared to the very unusual last previous year. So our reduction in burglaries can, of course, in some way be attributed to COVID. We know that nearly all of our burglaries to residential properties are committed when residents are not at home. So COVID significantly reduced the opportunities for our criminals to offend in this area. However, it's really pleasing to see that trend has continued. Even in the last 12 months, we've seen a 15% decrease in burglaries compared to the force average of 6%. And yet, despite the reduction in figures, we're still detecting at the same rate as the rest of the force as well, which is really promising to see. Just some really good local information. So last Friday afternoon, a burglary was reported by a local resident in Finch Hampstead. He'd returned to his address to find 2 suspicious persons in his vehicle next to his property. Thanks to his very quick thinking and his quick report, the initial uniformed response from officers, the good scenes of crime investigation, examination, and then the subsequent investigation carried out by my priority crime team, we saw that 2 suspects were arrested, charged and remanded in court by the following day on the Saturday morning. So really, really good news in relation to a very recent burglary there. To summarise burglary for the Wokingham area, you're far less likely to be a victim of dwelling burglary than the rest of TVP as a whole. So in the Wokingham area, 2.75 households in 1,000 are likely to be a victim of burglary compared to 3.45, which is the TVP average. So moving down the slide here, you will see there's clearly some concerns as well. The one that stands out for me as a concern is around our knife crime and our 28% increase in knife crime. So that figure relates specifically to knife-enabled crime. So it doesn't include possession offences, but rather focuses on offences where a knife is used. And those offences can range from offences such as a public order where a knife may be threatened. It doesn't even have to be seen, but the mention of a knife implied in that threat, right through to serious GBH offences with stabbings. Some of our increases, we have to acknowledge in this recorded area, stems from the intense scrutiny that we're given every incident that occurs now on the area. So we're getting better at recording with the correct knife crime classification, applying the right weapons flags, and generally just ensuring some better compliance with crime data integrity. So that does account for some of the increases. I think it's worth noting. Knife crime and serious violence remain one of the local area's top 3 priorities for the year ahead, which is only right, given obviously the devastating impact that knife crime has. Our approach for this year will continue to see increased scrutiny around our investigations, but also utilising the serious violence dashboard to identify our hotspot locations and our key offenders, including those habitual knife crime carriers, and as well as targeted enforcement, engagement and prevention. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about a local initiative next. Just one more thing to pick up on this slide, which is of concern, is our domestic violence, with the notable decrease in outcomes of investigations. So as a local police area, we have particular focus on this in our local domestic abuse plan, which is obviously a priority in line with our violence against women plan. So some more local in-depth scrutiny of those live cases in custodies and far more scrutiny around our disposal decisions has actually seen a 36% increase in our domestic outcomes since April of this year. That's across the whole of Bracknell and Wokingham, not just Wokingham as a figure, but I think that's really, really promising to see. Domestic abuse investigations are always more challenging when a victim doesn't want to provide evidence or, support those investigations going to court. So we're working really hard to improve our outcome rates with these type of cases by obtaining CPS charges without victim support. We also recognise that sometimes the court and conviction route may be not always the best outcome. So we're looking at our processes around out of court disposals and how to use those more appropriately to support our victims. We're also working hard to increase our use of other orders such as domestic violence protection orders, which is really important when we're not taking any further action on our cases and going to court. We can use those still to provide the victim with protection from harm, enhance the safeguarding, and provide that much needed space for the victim to get some specialist support. So that's just an overview of where we are in terms of crimes at the moment. Sham, do you want to go over to that next slide, please? Thank you. So just in terms of 2 local initiatives, I thought I'd talk very briefly about. The first was Operation Outbreak, which was a local operation to tackle knife crime through targeted enforcement and engagement in the Wokingham area. So as well as that intense scrutiny of the investigations, it is really important that we look to problem solve, to improve engagement and our education around the impact of carrying a knife and using a knife. So we use data from the violence reduction dashboard, layered with some local intelligence to identify our local offenders who were involved in repeat offences and known to habitually carry knives. And we utilise both our neighbourhood geographic teams and our tasking teams to proactively target those offenders. We then used intelligence to identify youths that were on the periphery of offending or linked in some way to youth violence as a base for our new engagement work. Our problem solving team carried out a survey with secondary schools across Wokingham, which really was to seek to understand the students' knowledge, their views and their perceptions of the risk. We then used that information to deliver relevant knife crime awareness packages to 8 schools across Wokingham, reaching over 1,000 students. So this work was completed in partnership with our community safety team, youth justice, schools and youth services in collaboration, and we're looking to continue with that in the next phase further on in this year. A second initiative I just want to touch very briefly on, which is quite different from knife crime, and that is car cruisers in the local area. So we recognise the impact of car cruisers have on the local community. There's a force-wide operational plan already in place to deal with such offences, but as a local area, we really want to focus more on problem solving. So we worked hard with partners in Wokingham to police some organised car meets, but importantly, as I said, to problem solve, to really make Wokingham a less appealing place for the organisers of such events. So we targeted specific antisocial car users, we used community protection warnings, we used section 59 warnings, and in some cases seized vehicles where legislation allowed. The council then followed this up with TROs, which are traffic regulation orders, as a prevention and deterrent measure to ensure that some target hardening of vulnerable locations could continue. Further work's currently ongoing with our community safety team, who are leading on the implementation of a PSPO. So that's a public space protection order, which will cover the whole borough, looking as a prevention and enforcement measure. This has been led by the community safety team and is only really possible because of the council's ongoing commitment and investment to ASB, with the new ASB service that was launched on the 1st of April, because they will be central to enforcing that PSPO when it arises. So for me, policing the car cruise issues is really, it's resource intensive. So we need to get better at working with our partners to prevent the events happening in the first place. I really, as an LPA commander, need to make sure that my resources are attending priority crimes such as domestic abuse, sexual offences and knife crime and violence, where there's, threat of risk and harm. But the only way I can do that is to tackle cases such like this with prevention work in partnership. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Just a couple of slides from me in conclusion then. So recently we were inspected. 3 good grades. One was crime recording, really encouraging about the crime figures that we're recording. So that means we can rely on, and hopefully you can rely on when I'm talking to you about crime figures, that we're starting from a good place. I'll move on to the next slide because there were a couple of areas that you might be more interested in where we can do better. We got one around response to the public, and this is really around call handling. And what the inspectorate was saying was that for certain types of call coming into the contact centres, some of the staff weren't doing enough to understand, if you like, any of the aspects of vulnerability around the callers, and that's quite complex. It certainly adds to the amount of time that call handlers are taking to answer, and that can impact on 101 and 909 call taking, but we acknowledge that, and we need to improve on that. And also,
excuse me, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time a little bit, and we would like to ask a couple of questions.
Yeah, certainly. Can I just go to one final slide, Chair, and that'll be it. Okay,
thank you.
Thanks. I guess final this one really, and I hopefully a lot of talk about police cultures at the moment. A lot of it, if you like, critical. I'd just like to share this final slide, which is basically what the inspectorate said about TVP when it came and inspected us around some pretty important stuff. One about culture, some about how we treat the public, and also how we use our powers. And in respect of some of the violence against women and girls, Chair, half my command team are senior female members of staff. Half my force is made up of women. We have more senior officers who are women than we've ever had before. And half of our recruits now are women coming to the police service. Now, I'm in no way complacent. We will have issues that we have to deal with, but I hope that reflects that not every aspect of policing that is reported on nationally is necessarily a local picture. But I would say, from my point of view, absolutely no complacency in these important areas of confidence and legitimacy. So thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I have one question. Is it possible to have a copy of the slides sent to us so we can send them all around to the councillors?
Oh yes, certainly. And what I would say as well, if there's any questions that we're unable to answer, we can always deal directly and send answers in separately.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Would the council like to have an extension of 5 minutes so that we can ask a couple of questions? Everybody for? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I've got questions. I'm going to take the order of the questions in the order they're received to Democratic Services. The first question is by Councillor Neil. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Right. Yes, talking to residents in Early, there have been a lot of concerns and fear about the targeted burglary of gold jewellery. Can you give any reassurance to residents about that this crime is decreasing and that tackling it is a priority for Thames Valley Police?
Thanks, Councillor. If I talk further, then Helen will speak locally. I think my slides show we actually saw almost 40% reduction in burglary over the last year or so. definitely, I think, aspect of COVID and people's working practices, living at home, etc. Helen can give a local assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. So there've not been any particular gold jewellery targeted burglaries in Woking of late. Our last one was recorded in May. That said, when they do occur, they do cause concern because the victims feel particularly targeted. I know there was particular concern in Woodley, so our priority crime team recently held a meeting to discuss those concerns with Woodley and early residents. I know councillors attended, residents and business leaders. Part of that meeting, we shared crime investigations, we shared crime levels, we talked about recent convictions, but more importantly, we talked about some better communication channels locally that we can use to spread information and also crime prevention advice. And just very quickly, as a local police area, I've made a commitment that my priority crime team, which consists of a detective inspector, detective sergeants and detective constables, will continue to own and investigate the more complex burglaries such as these series. They often span across different police areas and actually different police forces. So it's really important we've got the right resources and the right skilled detectives to investigate this type of complex offence. Following a protracted investigation by this very team this year, we got one particular burglar convicted of 7 family gold burglaries in the Woking area, and he's just been sentenced to 4.5 years. So I hope that gives some reassurance locally.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth, please.
Thank you very much. Sir Mo Farah's revelation that he was illegally trafficked to the UK as a child has made us all more aware of this problem. Rightly, the UK authorities have confirmed that no action will be taken against him as a victim of this abuse. I am concerned about people in this area who may be found to have been brought to the UK to work illegally. We know that this has happened in Wokingham in the recent past, and I have reported and asked for welfare checks on individuals where I've had concerns myself. Where someone from outside the UK is found to be working illegally in the Wokingham area, what steps do we take to assess whether they are a victim of trafficking and what is needed to protect them and safeguard their rights? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I mean, I can take it in the round. I mean, modern slavery and human trafficking is something that I think has become much more prominent in terms of everyone's awareness over recent times. Certainly, Sir Mo Farah's revelations will only support that awareness. I think it's fair to say, in simple terms, we've got to have it reported to us in the first place. Now, our police officers are trained to identify hidden harm and the potential for modern slavery and trafficking, and also, you know, seeing those individuals as victims rather than people that have automatically, you know, illegally come into the country. But certainly other agencies have an important role in this, because the council and other blue light services will be meeting people all the time. But the simple thing is, sometimes our organised crime teams are targeting, if you like, organised modern slavery, and we definitely, whenever we do police investigations, have a combination of enforcement and protection and prevention. That's definitely a strategy that's part of any senior police commander's tactics. In terms of any particular issues locally, Helen, have you got a view on modern slavery as a general issue within Wokingham?
I don't think there are any particular big issues. I think we've had the odd 1 or 2 cases where we've made referrals into the national referral mechanism and safeguarded locally, but there isn't certainly any themes or any trends at the moment that we could comment on.
And I think this will probably be the last question from Councillor Andy Croy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming you have a copy of the questions in front of you, so I would like to ask the question standing in my name. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. You've asked quite a lot of specific detail about numbers at the moment, and I don't have that for you tonight, but I'll make sure that we capture that. So this is a question about Community Speedwatch. In effect, you know, relaunched, and certainly the Commissioner has driven a lot of this activity. Local communities doing, if you like, high visibility enforcement and prevention activities, really welcome. Many villages, towns are subject to rat runs and speeding issues. As a force, we issued over 180,000 tickets last year, so it's something that we take very seriously, speeding enforcement. But obviously, we can't be everywhere at all times. You've heard some of the issues that policing deals with. We just touched on some of those, you know, today, violence against women and modern slavery. So the ability to police to be everywhere to enforce traffic and excess speed can sometimes be limited unless we have consistent patterns of behaviour. So community speed watch is really welcome, and is a great example of the police and the community working together. So your question in particular, Council, was having done that, where we've got repeat offenders, what are the outcomes and the evidence of that feeding into the system for us taking action? I haven't got that to hand at the moment. I don't know if Helen's got anything locally, but I can certainly get that to you as a piece of work outside this meeting. Helen?
Yeah, so just to say, across the Bracknell and Wokingham area, we've got 17 certified groups. There's 9 active groups. Of that 9 active groups, 7 are in Wokingham. I did manage to find out that of those 9 active groups, you've done 1,973 speeding generated awareness letters. Out of that huge number, only 13, so that's 0.06%, have reached that repeat 3 incidents in 6 months cohort that then allows us to go on and take additional action. That additional disruption that we do after they've reached that cohort is actually done by the Roads Policing team, not by my local police area. And having done asked a few questions, because those 13 are just so recently come through, we can't attribute them to particular parishes or schemes within Wokingham. But a particular contact for Community Speed Watch has said he's more than willing to get those figures for us and pass them on. So I'm happy to facilitate that for you.
I mean, I guess, Councillor, what I would say, with that low number of potential repeat offenders, one might argue that that local Community Speed Watch is pretty successful, and that's pretty encouraging. But it's definitely one to watch, and I'd be grateful for any feedback you have locally for that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time this evening. All the rest of the questions will be written. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was very good. We're moving on to the annual pay policy statement. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Sarah. Rachel Bishop. Is there a seconder? Pauline Jorgensen. Thank you very much. Councillor Bishop-Firth, would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Thank you. Ensuring that we pay our staff fairly and in line with the market is essential for the council. We have fantastic officers and we want to make sure that we retain them, as well as attracting the best talent when we need to recruit from outside the council. We will continue to benchmark our salaries against other councils to ensure that we are paying salaries to attract and retain the best talent, who can ensure that we are providing the best services to our residents. The report that we're looking at tonight is a statutory report providing factual information on salaries paid at the council, and I would like to thank our HR team for preparing this. The report allows councillors and residents to understand our pay arrangements and to assess whether we're getting good value for money. This report has previously published data on the relationship or pay ratio between the highest and lowest paid employees at the council. This year, in response to the revised implementation guidance on the Hutton Review issued last year, the report also includes some additional information, including top to medium, lower quartile and upper quartile employee pay ratios. I would like to add a few comments about the new administration's ambitions in this area. Firstly, as a major local employer and as a council committed to fighting poverty in the borough, we have a responsibility to show leadership in ensuring that everyone we employ is paid a fair wage. The council applies the national pay agreements reached by the National Joint Council for Local Government Services, the National Joint Council for Youth and Community Services, and the Salisbury Committee, which are compliant with the National Living Wage. During the year to come, the Personnel Board will be looking at whether there is more that we can and should do and at best practice in other councils. As part of this, and in answer to a request from the Labour Group, we have asked the Human Resources team to investigate whether Woking Borough Council should apply to become an accredited real living wage employer. Like many other employers, we are concerned by the gender pay gap at Woking Borough Council and want to be able to say that we have taken all necessary steps towards reducing this pay gap. During the course of the next year, we will work alongside the HR team to review the possible reasons for this gap and what we can do to tackle those elements which are within our control. This will include looking at best practice in other councils to see what could be adopted in Wokingham. But for now, as a factual report on salaries, I would like to recommend this report to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? Okay, can we take it to a vote, please? Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the Audit Committee report. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Dew. Do I have a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Harper. I need distance down. Thank you. Would the Councillor Dew like to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you. In the unavoidable absence of the current chair of the committee, I thank the previous chair of the Audit Committee for the annual report 2021-22 and recommend it to council. I also thank the previous committee for their work during 2021-22. Going forward, the Audit Committee has the range of experience and skills to meet its brief of monitoring and approving the internal audit activity and governance arrangements of the council, including oversight of risk management and approving the annual accounts. Across all political parties, the committee includes a former finance executive member, qualified accountants, IT and engineering consultants, and a risk management expert. The appointment of an external independent member to the committee and member training on the role of the Audit Committee and on risk management will allow for even more effective scrutiny of the timely completion of high-risk internal audit recommendations and governance in 2022-23. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak against the report? Thank you. So, okay, then we move straight to the vote. For those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the Standards Committee Annual Report 2021-22. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Morag Melvin. And do I have a seconder? Graham Howe. Thank you. Councillor Melvin, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to thank all the members of last year's committee and the chairman for their hard work and to recommend that their report be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak against the report? Thank you. And we move straight to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. The Wokingham Borough Wellbeing Board Annual Report 2021-22. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Hare. And do I have a seconder? Charles Maggett. Thank you very much. Councillor Hare, would you like to speak for the report?
This wellbeing report is from the last administration. I intend to build on these in a positive fashion and ensure that the Wellbeing Committee is active in its work, reports developments and successes, but also talks about disappointments that lead to how we can improve the appropriate service for Woking. Indeed, in the private meeting every other month, this will be an open, honest and supportive evaluation of how the differing areas are progressing, with colleagues being critical friends who speak the truth to make Woking wellbeing services as good as possible.
Thank you. Have I got anybody who wishes to speak against the report? Thank you. And we can go straight to the vote for. Thank you. Carried. Moving on to changes the constitution. Do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Shepherd-Bray. Do I have a seconder? Bray. Thank you. Would Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bray wish to speak? Thank you.
Okay. Under the last administration, in February 2022, Council agreed to change the rule 4.2.13.1. This altered the rules of debate, which stated that if no member wished to speak against an item on the agenda, the mayor or chairman would put the matter straight to a vote. We've always had problems at our full council meetings, getting all of the necessary business of that meeting completed within timescales we have. So this amendment seems originally necessary and shortened the time spent on discussions when we were actually all in agreement to them anyway. But this change also affected other meetings, such as the Audit Committee, Licensing Committee, Appeals Committee, the Scrutiny Committee, as they constitutionally referred to this ruling. So these proposed amendments that the Constitution Review Working Group have agreed allows those committees to separate themselves from this ruling, allowing members to speak in support of items, even if everyone agrees. However, we still propose keeping 4.2.13.1 in place for council and special council meetings, so that the timings of those meetings can still be managed. The other key point here is that we propose adding is inviting members with responsibility for reports that are being debated by any committee to present them and the answer questions on those reports, even when they are not a member of that committee. On that note, I'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to be against? Thank you. That's Pauline Jorgensen. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, we're unable to support this agenda item, not because we don't agree with everything in it, but because we don't think it goes far enough. At the moment, Special Council Executive, the motion changes the Special Council Executive so that the exec member can be present to answer questions, but the only way you can ask questions is to suggest that you are against the motion. If you can't ask questions, you can't actually work out whether you are against the motion. So therefore, this paper as it stands does not make any sense at all.
Seconder, Councillor Bray, do you like to speak now or reserve your?
I reserve my right, but I'm not sure if there's anybody else who wants to speak on anything.
Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Prue. Bray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we were happy to make these changes to relax the rules, which in fact came from the Conservative group, having put them in the first place in February. We were happy to relax them for the other groups, but we think it's appropriate for the Special Council Executive rules to mirror the full council rules as far as possible. A Special Council Executive is convened to take the place of a full council meeting when it's not possible to hold one. So while we're happy to relax the rules to allow people to speak, if no one opposes an item on the agenda for all the other committees, we feel that if we're not relaxing it for full council, we should not relax it for Special Council Executive. However, in the near future, it is very likely that we will want council to consider a number of different amendments to the way full council meetings operate in order to make them work better, preserve democratic discussion, but still get through the business. At that point, there is no reason why we should not consider changing 4.2.13.1 as part of that wider set of changes. Changing the rule for full council will then result in the change also being made for the Special Council Executive. So saying no to changing Special Council Executive now does not necessarily mean no forever. So in the meantime, can I suggest that if a member of Special Council Executive intends to vote for an agenda item, but has a point they would like answering before they vote, they seek clarity from officers and the relevant executive member before the actual meeting. If necessary, they can raise a written question for the meeting, which can be done after the agenda has been published. In fact, even if the rule were changed, submitting a written question is more likely to produce a full and accurate answer than raising something without warning during the course of the meeting, which tends to look like either you are trying to catch people out or you hadn't read the papers in advance of the meeting. So with all that said, I would ask you to vote for the changes now with the prospect of doing the extra bit that the Conservatives would like to see as a possibility later on. Thank you.
Councillor Barry. Chris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's a rather tortuous answer, I thought. I think the point is the Special Council Executive a variation on council? There's a variation on the executive. I feel it's a variation on the executive. And of course, it can be very often the a good idea to get an answer to a question in advance of the meeting. But in a democracy, people should be allowed to ask questions at the meeting without notice to keep the administration on its toes. I think it's misconstruing the nature of the special council executives. Thank you.
As the Councillor Shepherd-Dupre, would you like a right to reply, please, as the proposer?
I think, I mean, to be honest with you, this is a ruling that we've lived with for some time, and it was put in by the previous administration, and it was fine then. So I don't see why we need to change it. But you know, obviously we would consider changing it in the future. We're just not. It just wasn't ready at this point because we want to be able to control the debate and not have people grandstanding in meetings. Yes. That was what the original point of it was.
Thank you. Can we now take it to the vote? Those for the recommendation, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Those that abstain? Thank you. Sorry, those abstaining, please put your hands up. Thank you. The recommendation is carried. Thank you. Next item, additional council meeting. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Jones. Do I have a seconder? Stephen Conway. Councillor Jones, would you like to?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Over the last few years, under the Conservatives' leadership, we have rarely managed to get through all of the agenda at full council meetings. Many motions were left undebated and would be on the agenda again at the following meeting. At the following meeting, we would often run out of time again, so we wouldn't get to the motions. And of course, the Conservatives nearly always voted against a 30-minute extension of the meeting. Requests for an extra meeting were ignored by the Conservatives. We made it very clear on several occasions at council meetings that if we were running the administration of the council, we would add an extra council meeting to the timetable of meetings. Madam Mayor, this proposal to add an extra council meeting in October is the Liberal Democrat administration and our colleagues fulfilling a promise it made on several occasions at the previous full council meetings in the last few years. I hope that councillors will support this proposal.
Thank you. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak against the proposal, the report?
Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, so Councillor Conway seconding it. Thank you. Wish to speak against the report? Okay. Thank you. So we can go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Carrie, thank you very much. Now coming on to member question time. I have the first question, Councillor Michael Bumgen, to ask a question to Councillor Lindsay Ferris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yes, my question is to the executive member for planning and local plan. Given that coalition members have criticised the lack of development in Hurst, Twyford and the northern parishes,
Will the executive member for planning explain how many houses the council plans to build there?
Thank you, Michael. As many people will be aware, the emerging local plan will set the strategy for managing development, including areas of land for future development, new infrastructure and areas of protected green space. The last administration approved the revised growth strategy consultation last year. Consultation proposed several areas of land for new housing across Woking and Borough, including land in the northern parishes of Charvel, Hurst, Ruscombe, Sonning and Twyford. The proposed areas of land across these parishes would together deliver around 460 new homes. Sites with existing planning permission and other minor developments would be in addition to this. The comments received in response to the consultation are being reviewed and analysed. These will be carefully considered alongside technical information before we decide on how to move forward. Clearly, it would be wrong for me to predetermine the local plan process, and so I cannot comment on future decisions. It should be noted, however, that large parts of the northern parishes form part of the metropolitan green belt surrounding London. Any changes to green belt boundaries through the preparation of the local plan would need to demonstrate exceptional circumstances that necessitate a change, as set out in National Planning Policy.
Thank you. Councillor Firmager, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah. Just that the executive member mentions about the local plan update. I just really want to know, my understanding is that the local plan update needs to be in place by the end, by next year. Are you on track?
We are working to meet our obligations as well as we can. We had over 3,000 or just under 3,000 submissions to the last local planning update, and the officers have only just completed assessing them. And once we've gone through that, we will be dealing with those particular issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham to ask his questions of Councillor Hare, please.
Councillor Cummington.
Do apologise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, my question is for the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services. Does the coalition support the principle of a dementia care home in Townley?
Thank you, Councillor Cummington. I'd first of all remind you that, in fact, we're a partnership, not a coalition. But yes, this partnership supports the need for a new dementia care home as a key priority. We believe that it needs to be built as soon as possible, and we'll do all we can to promote its inclusion.
Councillor Cunnington, do you have a supplementary?
Please, Madam Mayor. That's very good to hear, although I sort of have a feeling that may be a majority support rather than unanimous. But my front question is, with the movement of people potentially from Suffolk Lodge to any new facility, does this mean the principle is to retain Suffolk Lodge in order to give additional dementia resources in the area?
As I would think you know, Suffolk Lodge is an old home which is much loved, but not appropriate for people who are in care at the moment. And so we will move people from Suffolk Lodge to the new home, but it will take time. And I don't know, but probably you know as well, that people being moved from one care home to another can shorten their lives and so on. We will be understanding of this, and therefore not move them all in one day, but spread out over several months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Margetts to ask the question to Councillor Ferris. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is, can the lead member for planning let me know what discussions are underway over the possible development of Rooks Nest Farm? Thank you.
Charles? Rooks Nest was one of the proposed allocations for housing included in the revised growth strategy consultation approved by the last administration. As you will be aware, the land is owned by the council. The new administration has asked officers to look at options for the future use of the land as alternatives to the consultation proposals for housing.
Councillor Margetts, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Thank you. And I welcome basically that as someone who was never in favour of the proposal in the first place. I would basically ask, you mentioned basically that you were planning to ask officers to look for alternatives to the housing scheme. I noticed a post on Facebook from Councillor Cornish the other day, which said much the same thing, where he was actually asking for responses from people basically who were looking. I wonder if you'd actually extend that consultation to the general public and the wider population than just a select Facebook group.
I personally have nothing to do with Facebook, so I don't know what you're talking about. We are setting up the cross-party working group that was in operation during 2020 and 2021. I have already written to the leaders of all the groups and to the two independents. I have had some feedback from. Sorry. Group could be used, but I've written to all of you. I've written to you, Pauline. I have had responses back, and the plan is to set up the working group in the very near future, hopefully from the end of July, and we will be then going through the various sites in the whole borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Blumenthal to ask a question of Councillor Stephen Conway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I met with residents of Grovelands Avenue in Winnish who are concerned about the temporary accommodation that the council is building there and how to impact on them. The new site is currently being built, and their number one request is that there should be no access from the site to the road west of it. The main access is currently from the north. Please, can you guarantee that their request is delivered?
Thank you, Laura. Your question relates to Grovelands, where the council is providing high quality temporary accommodation for the homeless. Members of our community, we should remember, who have found themselves in a nightmare situation, often due to private landlord evictions or appalling instances of domestic abuse. I visited Grovelands yesterday as part of a scheduled TLIP tour, accompanied by Ward Councillor Prue Bray. Prue had already alerted me to the concerns of existing residents about certain aspects of the scheme, so I was aware of the matter you raise. After the tour, Prue and I met with neighbouring residents to discuss ways in which we could address their concerns. My preferred solution is to seal off the western entrance and incorporate plot 48 into the rest of the site. I am working with our officers, whom I must say deserve the highest praise for their dedication and professionalism, and with the very impressive and responsive project architect to see whether we can put the solution that I've suggested into practice. If it can be put into practice, I think we will have overcome the neighbours' principal concerns, though we need also to secure appropriate landscaping on the boundary to address the problem of overlooking.
Councillor Blumenthal, do you have a supplementary?
I do, and thank you, Councillor Conway, for your response. Is it possible for the council to give the residents a name contact? So if they have any concerns or questions, they know who to go to. So they told me at present, they just feel like there's no one they can speak to.
That person is me. A council officer they could speak to is obviously Simon Price. Well, if you've already got an answer to your question, I'm not quite sure why you're asking it.
Thank you. Moving on, we have the next item, which is 20 minutes long, and it's any questions on committee meetings and ward matters. Show of hands, please, who'd like to ask. Thank you. First question to be asked by Councillor Bowring, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Exec Member for Planning and Local Plan. Good evening, Lindsay. The Pinewood Centre in my ward of Woking Without is a much valued facility. I got an assurance from your predecessor, Councillor Wayne Smith, last February that Woking Borough Council would not be building any housing on that site, which it owns. Can you reaffirm that commitment?
I have raised the issue of the Pinewood Centre with officers at of Wokingham, and we are going through the due process of the local plan that issue.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth next, please.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a ward question about the Tannhouse Railway crossing. Some years ago, the level crossing was replaced by a very steep temporary structure. This means that to get over the two railway lines, people have to navigate both a steep temporary bridge and a second crumbling concrete bridge. The Enbrook councillors have been campaigning for a number of years for this to be replaced with an accessible bridge. We're very glad to hear that Network Rail are looking to replace this dual bridge structure with a bridge over both railway lines. At present, however, the plan is to replace with a bridge with steps. This means that the crossing still won't be usable by anybody with a pram or a wheelchair, and this cannot be part of our cycling network. What steps are we taking to ask Network Rail to replace this bridge with one that can be used by young parents, cyclists, and those who need a wheelchair? Thank you.
That would be me. Thank you, Rachel, for that very interesting question. It's a very important topic as well. Tannhouse Bridge. I was alerted by officers about Tannhouse Bridge earlier this month because Network Rail are planning to replace the two bridges, the concrete bridge and the temporary structure by the end of March 2024. However, only with steps, which is absolutely no use whatsoever to us. So on the 11th of July, I wrote to John Horsell, not that John Horsell, Councillor John Horsell, but John Horsell, the Regional Director of Network Rail Southern Region. And in my letter, I said to him I wanted to contact him at the earliest opportunity to raise our concerns about the apparent lack of priority that they have given to the needs of mobility impaired people and our active travel agenda with regards to that particular project. To install steps on a bridge in that particular location is a huge missed opportunity for the next 50 plus years. I also CC'd in some key people, one of those being Grant Shapps, Secretary of State for Transport, Sir John Redwood, Wokingham's MP, Chris Boardman, Active Travel Guru, and also Peter Duggan, Department of Transport. I have received a response on Monday from John Horsell, Regional Director of Network Rail. Rather disappointing because they appear to be avoiding DDA compliance and the active travel requirements that I set out. So the question to Network Rail is quite simple. We're trying to get them to deliver the right bridge that will be in place at that location for 50 plus years. And they must take account of mobility impaired and the emerging LC width, which the Borough Council have got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for Highway and Transport, again for Paul. The path in Sanford Park, Woodley, running along its southeast edge is very uneven, caused by 2 raised drains covers and at least 2 big tree roots. It is impossible for pushchairs and wheelchairs and a trip hazard. Could the council advise when it will be repaired and made safe useful for all the residents? Thank you.
I'll look into that for you. If you could just email me the location, that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Margette's question, please.
Thank you. No problem. My question is for Councillor Bray and regards Bowhunt School. I had an email 2 nights ago from a parent governor of Bowhunt School who lives in my ward, expressing concern that the announcement that was made in March, basically that we're going to deliver, we as in the council, sixth form, extra year 7 places and SEND provision at Bowhunt School by September 23 is not going to be met because of slow progress. Now, I'm not expecting Councillor Bray to answer that because she's not had sight of the question and that's not fair. But what I would ask basically is could she just reassure me that the council's commitment to still proceed with this scheme? And also, basically, would she mind basically doing a monthly or regular update to local members on progress as it advances? And finally, I would say, as some member for Finch Hampstead, I'm keen to support this process. And if she wishes to involve local members, I'd be happy to play a constructive part.
As it happens, we had a meeting about this very subject this afternoon, at which I told both the council officers who were present and the representatives of Bowhunt School that we will continue to make progress. We had a constructive meeting this afternoon, and that I would be keeping all local members informed on a regular basis. And I will also extend that courtesy to Graham Howe as my opposite number. So you can expect an update in the next few days.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for Highways. There is a small car park on Ashridge Road opposite the entrance to Keephat School, surrounded by small local shops, and there is a Sainsbury's local next door. Unfortunately, almost without exception, at school run times and at other times during the day, large vehicles, often pickups or 4x4s, mount the curb and park either side of the entrance on the actual pavement. I wonder if there is any way that we could consider some cost-effective way of providing some non-human bollards to protect the pavement and to provide safety for parents and children.
Sorry, excuse me. Councillor Jorgensen, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, there was no need to disrupt I just wanted to ask a question. I didn't put my hand up initially.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. Sorry, Councillor Cunningham, please continue.
That's okay. If there was a cost-effective way to protect parents and children walking on that very busy route, both from Keephat School and from All Saints School.
Thank you very much for your question. I'll certainly have a look into that and I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Blumenthal next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got another question for the Executive Member for Highways. So the Council's current cycling consultation proposes removing the parking places opposite Health Drive. Please can you guarantee that these parking places won't be removed if Reading Council doesn't give permission for parking spots to be built on the grass verges behind the houses that exist already?
Thank you for your question. I've had an email back from Reading Borough Council and they've said that we can use Port Close for parking.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who this is for. It's a question for the Exec Member for Environment. Sorry, thank you. A local resident who lives near Laurel Park car park has been locking the gates to the car park on the request of Early Town Council for many years. I believe that Early Town Council are now handing the car park back to the Borough Council. The residents have been doing this, I say, for a long time, in order to avoid antisocial behaviour. And I wondered if the Borough Council would recognise the fact that they no longer wanted to perform this activity and would do something about it. And if so, what were you going to do?
If you could perhaps email the details to me, I will certainly have a look at what the situation is.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to announce a five. Oh, sorry.
I raised my hand earlier on for that vote question.
Do apologise, we must have missed you. Would you like to go ahead then? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, a question for the executive member for highways. The current cycling consultation proposes the removal of bay parking spaces between Bullmarsh Leisure Centre and Church Road. The bay parking is often packed and overflowing on the weekends. Please, can you share if any analysis has been done on parking needs and where you propose all these car parks cars will be parked in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. There is some background data behind this. I don't have that available here, but I will get back to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to announce a 5-minute comfort break if everybody would like to have a comfort break. Thank you. I'm now moving on to statements by the leader, executive members and deputy executive members. We've got 20 minutes for that. Who'd like to speak? Councillor Jones. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Fishwick, Councillor Ferris, Councillor Bishop Burr. Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you like to start, please?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I and my colleagues were absolutely delighted to take over the responsibility for running the administration of the Borough Council following the annual council on the 19th of May. We have formed the Wokingham Borough Partnership with Labour and independent colleagues. We are working together in a spirit of cooperation that I have to say is working very well. We have been happy to share the chairs of overview and scrutiny committees with other parties, something never done before on this council, but it is done in a lot of other councils. I'm pleased that independent councillor Jim Fruin is the chair of overview and scrutiny management. We suggested Conservative councillor Alison Swaddle as the chair of the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but the leader of the opposition turned this down. She also turned down having a Conservative vice chair of Overview and Scrutiny Management. A contrast to this has been the willingness of the borough's 3 Conservative MPs, who have actively engaged with us to present plans to the Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities to try to get housing numbers down in Wokingham. We also had a commitment from Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, we also had a commitment from Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, to come to Wokingham to meet with us. This, of course, was before he was sacked by Boris Johnson. We hope Michael Gove's successor, Greg Clark, will come to Wokingham. We have asked him to visit us. The MPs that have met with us in person, and both Theresa May and James Sunderland have agreed to try to work together to lobby the government in an attempt to get some clarity around the government's proposals for reforming adult social care. At the moment, the proposals will create serious financial instability in many councils across the south of England. So there needs to be some clarity about how the massive increase in cost for adult social care will be funded. It can't be left to local councils to fund the reforms. Madam Mayor, currently there is a government currently there is government funding for free school meals during school holidays for children who would normally receive them during term time. There is no guarantee that this funding will be extended after this year's summer holidays. We are all aware that there is a serious cost of living crisis which is hitting us all. The administration and our colleagues are committed to help the most vulnerable in our community wherever we can. I can confirm that the council will support free school meals during school holidays from the end of the summer holiday right through to May 2023. This confirmation will be a great support and comfort to the families who are receiving free school meals. This support will help them to budget and to prioritise their spending at a time when they are being hit from all directions. Increases in fuel costs, nearly £2 a litre, massive increase in gas and electricity prices, increases in national insurance, huge increases in food prices. Generally, everything is going up in shops with inflation at 10%. Much of this caused by the devaluation of the pound by 20% since Brexit. Hopefully, there will be further government support for free school meals during school holidays, but if there isn't, we will do what we can to help. This confirmation will help many of the 2,000 families in the borough who rely on preschool meals. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would now like to hear from some of my executive colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Fishwick, please. Councillor Paul Fishwick, please, would you like your 5 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a statement from the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. I wish to highlight to this chamber that at an individual executive member decision held on Wednesday, the 13th of July, I approved with Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubey to modify the contract term to allow the 128 from 129 bus service linking Winnersh, Hurst, Twyford, Sonning and Woodley to Wokingham and Reading, plus other bus services affecting Wokingham Town to continue to operate. This will allow the council time to go out to tender. However, the funding for these services was not budgeted for by the previous administration, and £82,440 of Section 106 funding will be required to fund these services until the 31st of March 2023. I've also written to the Police and Crime Commissioner on the 24th of June related to the lack of mobile speed enforcement across the borough. That hasn't taken place for over 3 years. Our experience over the last 3 years has been that Thames Valley Police are reluctant.
Sorry, Councillor Fishwick, I've got a Councillor Jorgensen standing.
Yes,
I'm looking. Point of order?
I do. Point of personal explanation. I'm just looking for the number. Hang on.
Sorry,
4.2.13.13.
Okay, what's your point of clarification?
My point of clarification is in February this year, at an executive meeting, extra funding was set aside from 106, which I can't disclose the amount of because it's part 2, to subsidise future bus services if there were problems with future funding by the Conservatives. I have no idea what you spent it on.
Sorry, I cannot allow that. That's not a point of clarification. So a personal clarification. So Councillor Fishwick, could you continue and we'll take the time off?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our experience over the last 3 years has been that Thames Valley Police are reluctant to prioritise speed limit enforcement activity through anything other than community speed watch approach. Whilst we and many of our local communities are supportive of this scheme, we do feel that it is important that the efforts of local residents are backed up by a reasonable level of actual police enforcement activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bishop-Firth, please.
Thank you. I'm delighted that Councillor Clive Jones was able to confirm Woking Borough Council's support to those families most affected by the cost of living crisis. We hope that by committing to support those who rely on benefits related to free school meals during the school holidays, we'll take a mind off the weight of the Woking parents who are facing the biggest challenges in the current cost of living crisis. Distribution of the Household Support Fund is well underway with the support of our voluntary sector partners. Over 1,000 households have applied so far, and this means that we have reached about 80% of free school meals pupils already. A high number of those contacting our partners have taken advantage of offers of additional support. So, for example, 76% of those approaching first days have asked for further support. We're aware that some of those using vouchers to access cash have had problems. This is because several, mainly smaller providers with PayPoint terminals, do not have enough cash on site to be able to make payments. The Council and our Hardship Alliance partners are working proactively to find solutions. This includes contacting people who have requested cash vouchers to see if they would like to switch to food vouchers instead, and signposting residents towards PayPoints that can support the amount of cash needed. We want to assure residents that we are doing everything that we can to get this much needed support to them. We are now encouraging more people to come forward for support if they need it. We would appreciate the support of members here in this chamber tonight in getting the message out to residents within your wards, particularly pensioners and those families who are just about managing. and we will share with you a leaflet in order to support that. We would like to thank the officers for organising the fantastic welcome event for new arrivals in the borough last Saturday, which the Mayor referred to earlier, and to the voluntary community sector organisations who came along to support it. And finally, the Residents Equality Forum is now working hard to ensure that voices from all parts of our community are heard as we work to become a more inclusive borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris, please.
I'll say, in the interest of time, and the fact that the leader of the council has said a lot of what I wanted to say, I will pass.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to statements from council-owned companies. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. There have been a number of changes to the boards of WBC Holdings, Loddon Homes, Berrybrook Homes and Optilis. Conservative nominated directors have been replaced with Liberal Democrats. I would like to thank all those directors who have served in recent years, and thank them very much. There have been meetings of the boards of Loddon Homes and WBC Holdings. The first board meeting of Loddon Homes was very productive. The non-executive directors made several comments about changes in directors over the last few years, mainly when there had been changes in the Conservative leadership. We will be working closely with them in the coming months to agree a strategy for the coming years, and we will be going back to having more regular reports from council-owned companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. We're now moving on to the motions. Motion number 480. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Shirley Boyd. And do I have a seconder? Rachel Fisher. Thank you. Would Shirley Boyd like to speak to the motion, please?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst I welcome the household support grant rollout, the funding is temporary and this council will have to fill this gap by other means in the not too distant future. The local welfare provision scheme exists to provide immediate financial support to those in emergency need. It can and should play a vital role. In England, under austerity, local welfare provision funding has plummeted in recent years, and Wokingham is no different. We have a local welfare scheme, but it is hardly used. The number of people helped in the borough by the scheme has fallen by 89% since 2017, and we only helped 10 people last year, with just £3,000 being spent by the scheme. Yet in our borough, there are more people facing poverty than ever before, and the cost of living crisis is adding to that number on a daily basis. Many families are just one unexpected event away from being unable to feed and clothe their children. The potential of this scheme is being wasted. We have a pot of money agreed every year that we are not using. The entire scheme needs to be urgently reviewed and embedded into the Tackling Poverty strategy. Feedback from the voluntary sector suggests that our residents either don't know about this scheme or don't know how to access it, and even those that do find it difficult to apply. Even council officers are not always aware of the scheme and don't know how to use it. Instead, these charities are expected to fill the gap, the shortfall in resources that can and should be filled by the council. This should change. Feedback also suggests that the scheme is impenetrable. It needs to be in plain English without jargon. Strict checks or complicated forms can be a major barrier for those who are struggling. We must work to remove barriers to application and make sure residents themselves can easily access the scheme. The method of provision also needs review. Research from the Children's Society has shown that a move from cash awards to in-kind awards can act as a disincentive. Currently, cash is provided only in exceptional circumstances. However, we must consider the availability of cash-first approaches, if that would be the best help to support the resident. If offered in tandem with measures such as debt advice and income maximisation, cash can be empowering rather than restrictive or stigmatising. In some circumstances, vouchers or other provision might be appropriate, but the key is that these are individuals who should have agency in the choices they make, just like anyone else. In addition, as so little is being spent, we must review the qualifying criteria for the scheme and consider broadening the number of people who are eligible. This motion is not asking for a specific sum of money, simply for the scheme to be reviewed and its operation reconsidered. that the allocated budget is spent and that in the process residents are treated with the respect they deserve. Please support this motion to provide a safety net for our residents direct from the council in the longer term.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? Okay, thank you. Then can we go for a vote for the motion, please? For? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Motion 482. Do I have a proposer, please? And Adrian Mather, Councillor Mather. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Mickleborough. Thank you very much. Councillor Mather, would you like to speak for 3 minutes, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Madam Mayor. There needs to be a fundamental change in how we generate and consume energy in all aspects of our lives. Both electricity generation and distribution are undergoing significant rapid evolution in both shape and scale. The electricity distribution grid must now cope with flows in both directions. In scale, electrification of heat and transport will require a quadrupling of electricity capacity. Local community-based energy schemes can make a significant contribution to addressing both issues and encourage a sense of local empowerment to tackle the climate change. Community schemes encourage local generation and storage to map local demand, thus relieving pressure on the grid. Local schemes would give new impetus and be able to contribute more renewable energy if local people could buy their electricity directly from their local suppliers. But the disproportionate cost of meeting regulatory approvals makes it impossible for a local energy supplier at a local scale. And so, under the current system, this local energy has to be sold back to the central grid. The local electricity bill is a private member's bill with cross-party support, including Sir John Redwood, that was introduced unopposed in June 2020. If this bill was passed in Parliament, it would give the energy regulator, Ofgem, a duty to create a right to local supply. This would enable local community energy groups to achieve their vision of supplying generated energy back to the local area. It would also help us as a council to meet our carbon reduction aspirations for the borough and also bring multiple benefits to the local community. It is supported by many stakeholders, local authorities, town council, and currently has the backing of 208 MPs. Specifically, this council would agree to resolve to support the bill, authorise the leader to contact our MPs to discuss their support for the bill and how they can enable its passage into law, authorise the Chief Executive to write to the Minister of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, supporting the aims of the bill and asking for these aims to be taken into account for the forthcoming white paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody wishing to speak against the motion? That's Charles Murray. Councillor Gregor Murray, sorry. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I actually support this motion in its entirety. What Councillor Mather has said in terms of it helping us reduce our carbon footprint, the opportunity it provides us with creating a solar park. I am going to be voting against this motion.
Okay.
And I am speaking against it. I do support what Councillor Mather has said. But I've also already stood in this chamber and said we should support this. I've already written to the MPs. I've stood in this chamber and read out the responses that I got from our MPs. I stood in this chamber and said I'd written to the Secretary of State for Energy and I'd talked about the response that I had been given. This motion is a complete waste of the council's time because we've already agreed to do it. And that is why I personally will be voting against it, although I do actually recommend that everybody in the council votes for it because it will actually be a very good thing for the council. So please do support it. But I personally think that this motion is a waste of time.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak now or reserve his right?
I reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I remember your speech when you said that you wanted to support this, Councillor Murray. I took advice from Democratic Services after that, because when we first put this motion in, we were told it needed the agreement of full council. And because we hadn't had full council agreement, some of the actions couldn't be authorised by a single executive member at that time. And that's why we brought this and carried on putting this motion in. So we're actually talking about a different leader now. So even if you had written, there's nothing stopping Councillor Jones writing. And it takes full council to actually authorise the second request, the recommendation in this motion. So that's why we brought it back. It wasn't a case of wasting time. It's actually a case of it requires full council to actually authorise this. So I do suggest everyone votes in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mickleborough, would you like your right to reply?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We're being asked tonight to offer our support as a council to help release the potential for community renewable energy to benefit local communities, including our own, by calling on the government to remove the unfair regulations that currently hinder this. I urge all colleagues to support calls for a local electricity bill that would give community scale renewable energy a massive boost by empowering local people, local communities to sell their renewable energy directly to local people, with all the environmental and economic benefits this will bring. Thank you.
Thank you. The proposer, Councillor Mather, would you like a right to reply before we go to the vote?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Murray, for your advice to our colleagues to vote for this. I appreciate that. Also, thank you very much to Councillor Kerr for the clarification on the point that this is a kind of a formal step in the process. So I commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to go to the vote now. I'd like to start with those in favour. Please raise your hands. Thank you. Carried. Against? Abstain? Carried. Thank you. Now moving on to motion 483.
Under Rule 4.2.13.9, I'd like to withdraw this, please. I want to ensure we get to the other motions, and there are other routes that this can be done. So thank you very much.
And does your seconder agree? Thank you. Sorry, can we take this to a quick vote, please? Those in favour of withdrawing this motion, please raise your hands. Thank you.
Sorry, under Rule 4.2.13.16, I'd just like to ask Andrew Moulton whether it's necessary to have a vote to withdraw, just for future clarity.
Yes, for a point of clarification, withdrawal of a motion under 4.2.13.9. You're supposed to have a vote. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Thank you. Moving on to motion 484 submitted by Charles Margetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to draw your attention to the alteration, which is in blue, which should be on everybody's desks. I'm proposing that. I believe.
I will second it.
Would the proposer like to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Fishwick, who's agreed to second this motion. He and I have agreed the wording together, and I think this shows what's possible when we all work together for the benefit of residents. I, like many other people who live in the borough, have travelled by train to Waterloo for many years for work and business over time. The line has seen investment in recent years with 10-car trains. However, the greatest issue, which impedes further rail usage, remains unresolved. It's 36 miles by rail from Wokingham to London Waterloo. This journey normally takes 1 hour and 11 minutes, an average speed of 30.4 miles per hour. In 1975, it took 45 minutes on a fast train to do the same journey. We've gone backwards at an alarming rate. It's important that we speed up this rail journey for many reasons. We need to encourage and improve all public transport alternatives to the car and remove unnecessary car journeys from the road. From where I live in Finchampstead, it's quicker if heading to Waterloo to drive to Fleet and take the train to Waterloo, a journey time of 35 minutes, or if heading to Paddington to drive to Twyford and take the train from there. I know many other people who do similar things. A quicker rail route from Wokingham to London would negate the need for these journeys and remove congestion off our stretched roads. It's also worth noting that passenger numbers at all the Wokingham stations are either static or falling over the last 6 years. Residents are seeking quicker travel solutions due to slow speeds. It would bring significant economic benefits to the area. A better rail route to all Wokingham stations would encourage investment in the area from visitors to our retail and leisure businesses, which would bring benefits to everyone. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, it would be better for the environment, as it would reduce pollution caused by excess car journeys by removing cars from the route and removing the need to find faster rail journeys. As long ago as 2014, the Berkshire Let concluded a 25% reduction in time along the Reading to Waterloo route would produce economic benefits to Wokingham of between 66 and 91 million pounds. Just imagine what these figures could be now. In 2017, Network Rail had a proposal to reduce journey times to 59 minutes from Wokingham to London, which would be achieved by all trains running fast from Twickenham. The logic from this was the minimal demand from passengers from this end of the line to stop to use those stops. I hope all members will join me in voting for this, representing the needs of our residents and calling for an improvement to this service. I would ask, if successful with this motion, that WBC as a whole collectively campaigns for progress in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. We've just bypassed part of the process. We're supposed to have voted on your alteration. So can I have a quick show of hands on your alteration as in the blue sheet? Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, do we have anybody who wishes to speak against the motion? Sorry, we need to propose it again. So, okay, and second it again.
Well, I'll propose it, Mayor. No surprise there.
Yeah, sorry.
And I'll still second it.
Thank you. And we still have nobody who wishes to speak against the report. So can we go straight to the vote, please? 4. Thank you. Against? Thank you. Carried. Now moving on to motion 485 submitted by Gary Cowan. Would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The wording of the motion really tells the story.
Sorry, Councillor Cowan, I need your seconder. Thank you, Councillor Cornish. Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, the intent of the motion tells the story I'm trying to put forward to the council. Giving livestock animals as prizes in any form is abhorrent and not how society in the 21st century should work. And this motion, if approved by the council, will right that wrong, and it's a decent decision to make, which I hope this council will support. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak against this motion? Okay, then I can go straight to the vote. Those who'd like to vote for the motion, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anybody against? No. Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that concludes this evening's business. Thank you for your time and thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No, that's a miracle. Well, thank you. You're going to be here.